Hey everyone, my name is Sean Cecil from the Oculus Institute, and today I'm going to teach you about Burnout-Laziness Oscillation. Okay, so I just opened that with a crazy term, right? Burnout-Laziness Oscillation. What the hell am I even talking about? So this is a pattern that I've observed in clients, in people who I've been helping, and across the board, just people that I see, right? And what I've noticed is that people will often oscillate between burnout and laziness. So, they may be working really hard or they may be working at a really toxic job and they'll get to a point of burnout and then they'll either quit or get fired because it's normally what happens when you're burned out. And then they'll go into this what I call Post Burnout Stress Disorder where they just don't want to work. They just don't want to do anything, right? And that's fine for 2 or 3 weeks, right? If you've really been in a toxic situation, you may need a couple weeks to recover. I've been in some really, really, really rough situations and within 2 or 3 weeks, it's like, okay, I can get back on the horse. But what I've found is that very often people will get to the point where they've actually recovered, but they've now internalized this habit of not working, right? And then they'll just go into this kind of lazy spiral where they're like, oh yeah, I just really don't want to do that. I'd rather not, and so they start putting in very little effort. That creates this issue because now they're not earning money because they burned out or they quit, right? So now they're sitting there and then eventually they'll stress about their finances and eventually it will get down to a point where they don't have a choice, where they are in grave financial danger and grave financial need, and then they'll go and they'll scramble and they'll work really, really, really hard and they'll go get some new job and then they'll do that for a while, and normally because they're taking the first thing that they could get, it's normally not going to be the healthiest job, so they normally end up in another toxic job, right? And then they'll do that and then eventually they'll burn out again and then they'll go back. And so people can either oscillate between these two, or sometimes they'll get trapped in one or the other because the other one was just so bad. And these are the only two modes that they know of life, right? Is either burnout or not earning any money because they're being lazy. And fundamentally, right, like how, this is a cycle that you want to break, right? Because not everybody lives in that, right? I know for people who are in it, they think that that's the way everybody lives, but it's not, right? I know many people who don't live in that, who don't get to that burnout phase. And I'm, that's why I'm making these videos to teach you guys how to break that cycle, how to not be in burnout. And so fundamentally, the way you want to think about this is in terms of polarization. So polarization is a term that refers to when things are split between extremes, right? So if you think of somebody who's bipolar, right? Polar, it's in the word, right? They'll oscillate between like really happy and really sad, right? The manic and the depressive phases, as they call it. It's a similar thing here. And what happens is that the two tend to move, in sync with each other. So for example, if you push yourself harder to the burnout side, you're gonna fall farther on the laziness side or the post-burnout stress disorder side, right? The longer you wait on the post-burnout stress disorder side, the more of a crisis you're gonna be in, the harder you're gonna have to work, the more likely you are to take a toxic job, the more likely you are to get on the burnout side. So the goal is not to shift in either direction. The goal is to shift away from the extremes and towards the center. And so what that means is, when you're going and getting a job, try to make sure that you get one that's at least not totally toxic, right? Try to make sure that each one is just a little bit better than the last, right? Obviously, if you're in a grave crisis, you may not be able to do that. You may have to just take whatever's gonna pay immediately. But if that's the case, then really quickly start looking for the next job. Don't stay there for, 2 years, right? If it's not a great job, then, spend a couple months taking your paycheck and then move on to something better. Because the less extreme you are on the burnout side, the less likely you are to fall into the post-burnout stress disorder. Now, on the other side, if you're in this thing where you've built this habit of really not doing a lot of work and you're still in, recovery from the toxic job, right? You want to make this one less extreme. And so you may want to say, hey, listen, I'm going to dedicate 1 hour a day to putting in work, to, trying to find a new job or create a new business or whatever it is. And you start with 1 hour a day. And then the next week you do 2 hours a day. And then the next week you do 3 hours a day, right? And so you're making this less extreme. And in doing that, you're going to create more opportunities for yourself. And that's going to prevent you from getting into this grave crisis. And then you may be able to find a not the perfect job, but a decent job, right? And then from there you can move up and you can make that less extreme. And so ultimately what you do is you depolarize and you collapse these extremes into something that's healthy. And once you do that, then you get to move upwards and you get to ascend on terms of how much money you're making and how much career fulfillment you have, all that kind of stuff. And yes, that all requires work. That all requires, getting clear on your purpose. That all requires, putting in effort and adding more value and learning how to persuade people and all this kind of stuff. But it stops you from being in this oscillation that you want to break, right? And so the key, guys, is depolarization. Before you go, I've got a free gift for you. So if you found this video valuable, if it helped you see the world in a new way, and you're interested in building a career that's going to bring you both personal fulfillment and financial prosperity, then I've got a free presentation for you to help you do just that. So if you go to the link below, it's www.oculusinstitute.com/workshop. That's www.oculusinstitute.com/workshop. Then it'll take you to a registration for a free presentation. It's about 50 minutes long, that's 50, and it's gonna give you the step-by-step process to building your dream career. See you there.